So the Brooklyn Nets, for whatever reason, that's my basketball team. Has been since I was a kid. I don't know why I made that decision. I wish someone would have stopped me. I mean, I could probably talk about them for 40 minutes. We're not going to do that today. Maybe another day. The Nets are in a really, really bad spot. After a decent start to the year that started to give people like myself some hope, you could certainly argue that they have completely lost any sense of direction that they might have had before the season. About 10 games, 12 games ago, the Nets went on this big West Coast road trip. They went to Phoenix and they beat the Suns. And it was this really cool moment because they beat Kevin Durant and it was just this team win where Phoenix was the better team, but they were still able to win on the road in Phoenix. Since that game, not saying this lightly, the Nets have been arguably the worst team in the league that isn't the Detroit Pistons. Like, there are other teams around the league that are bad. Charlotte's really bad. Spurs have not been very good. The Nets lost to the Wizards not that long ago. They're like 2-10 in their last 12 games. They just got destroyed by the Pelicans. And even worse than that, this appears to be a team without a true direction. At the beginning of the season, it was Mikal Bridges and Cam Thomas, and they weren't guarding particularly well, but they were able to put together a really, really good offensive group because they were shooting the ball really well. There was a ton of spacing. Everybody was sharing the ball, and that has just completely collapsed. It's been a very weird situation, and now you have to start wondering what the rest of the season is going to look like for Brooklyn. I honestly think that we are now at the point where they're going to have to start seriously considering breaking down this team. The reason that they haven't done it yet or didn't do it going into the season is, one, they probably thought they could be a 40 to 45 win team potentially, and two, they don't have their own draft pick this year. So they have other teams' picks. They have Phoenix, they have Philadelphia future pick, they have a Dallas future pick or two, but they don't have their own. Houston has their pick this year, and that always is going to make a team hesitant to break things down. But this is a team that has a lot of pieces that other teams around the league would want. Like, there are plenty of teams, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, the LA teams, Miami, there are plenty of teams around the league that would be excited if Brooklyn did decide to kind of rebuild things and break their team down, because they've got a ton of different wings that they could trade. They've got some bigs that could be interesting for a variety of different teams. And I think we're quickly approaching the point at which Brooklyn is going to be at least faced with that decision. I don't know if they're going to make that decision, because to actively make your team worse in a year in which you don't have your own draft pick, not ideal. But some of these guys like Nick Claxton need a new contract. Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith, these guys are probably at the peak of their value. And so even with the situation with the draft pick, it might still make sense to trade these guys. And it sucks that they are where they are, right? Like, the future is still decent. They've still got, someone like Cam Thomas, despite the fact that they don't really play him that much anymore. They do still have plenty of future picks, but definitely very, very close to being in seller mode in Brooklyn. And I really think that the core foundational question for this team that needs to be answered is, who are the pieces that you're moving forward with? Because prior to this recent, downturn for them, like when they beat Phoenix, there were conversations about, do they need to add, a star? Do they need to maybe go out and get Donovan Mitchell with these future picks that they have, because they have, all these wings that could potentially play well alongside a star? They were at least semi-involved potentially in some Damian Lillard conversations this past offseason, so there was a structure there that made sense for them to potentially add. But if they're not going to do that and they're going to start breaking things down, you have to identify who you're keeping. You can't just trade away everybody. You have to keep in mind, hey, these are the players that are going to stay on the roster. And I asked that question to you. Who are the keepers on the team? A lot of people really like Cam Thomas, and he was awesome to begin the season, but clearly there's something happening with the coaching staff. A lot of Nets fans hate the coaching staff. There's something happening there that they don't trust Cam Thomas. Obviously, he can't guard. He's not a very good facilitator. He can absolutely score the ball, but I think it's certainly a question mark right now if he's a foundational piece for the team. You also have Mikal Bridges, who is arguably the most interesting piece in all of this, because at the time that they traded for Bridges, when they got him from Phoenix, Memphis offered 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and other teams offered multiple firsts for Bridges. The Nets decided to keep him. He was awesome at the end of last year, and this year he's had some good moments, and at other times not so great. He's fallen off defensively, not a super efficient scorer. Obviously, it's not an ideal circumstance for him, but you do have to start thinking about, is he a foundational piece, or is he someone you could look to potentially move? Because he's not as young as you would think that he is. He's a little closer to 30 than you would think that he would be, and even though he's on this fantastic contract that I think is one of the main reasons why he has so much value, because he is so cheap relative to the other players around the league that are kind of on his level in terms of being a two-way player, and that's really valuable to these contending teams that already have expensive rosters. I wouldn't be surprised if they start to look at trading away Mikal Bridges as a real possibility. And if, let's say, they don't view Cam Thomas on that level of a foundational player, and they're seriously considering trading away Mikal Bridges, who's left on the team that you view as a foundational piece? Nick Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe, Ben Simmons? No. So that's kind of my point here. The Nets don't have their pick. They don't appear to have players that they feel are foundational to the future of their franchise, apart from potentially Bridges and Thomas. And they have all these other pieces that are very clearly valuable to other teams that they can get stuff for. And in any other situation, like if the Nets had their pick this year, you would just assume that they would start trading away Finney Smith and Royce O'Neal, these guys that are, 30 plus that are going to get, some stuff. You're going to at least get, a future first or something for those guys. There's a lot of teams around the league that would really like to add, some depth pieces on the wing. You would just do that. But them not having the first round pick complicates the situation. And I can easily foresee a scenario where Brooklyn goes into the second half of the season beyond the trade deadline with this exact roster. And the concern for me as a fan, as well as just if I was an unbiased observer of the team, that doesn't feel like the correct decision. You can't get the Houston pick back. You can't get that pick back from them. It is gone. It is a sunk cost. Nothing you do this season, apart from literally trading with the Rockets, gets you your first round pick back this year. So unless for whatever reason they're willing to trade the pick back, it's not a real possibility. You have to act as if that pick is already gone. And you can't worry about where the pick lands in the draft and what it means to potentially break things down, because if you can get more value this season for Finney Smith, Royce O'Neal, whoever you want to trade, if you can get more value for those guys this year than you could next year, then the correct decision is to trade them regardless of where your pick lands in this upcoming draft. Now, at the end of the day, there is still plenty of hope for the future in Brooklyn. Plenty of people were upset about the front office and the coaching staff and all that. But apart from that, from an asset perspective, obviously them not owning their own picks is an issue, but they own a ton of other future firsts. They have all those Phoenix picks, and there are still some players, whether it be Cam Thomas or Bridges, that are exciting or relatively exciting on the roster. Claxton is another interesting guy that they could potentially look to move or keep. Day'Ron Sharpe has been really good this year. There's plenty of possibilities there in terms of what the future of Brooklyn Nets basketball could potentially look like. And generally speaking, this is a team that's done a good job of developing players despite not having high picks in the draft. So that is all good stuff. But for this season right now, the concern isn't the future. The concern isn't the future assets. The concern is the direction of the team. And we've talked about this with Toronto pre-OG Anunoby trade. We've talked about this with Atlanta. Not having a direction, not knowing where you're going is the most dangerous place you can possibly be. Feeling like, one group, maybe the front office wants to break things down, the coaching staff doesn't, feeling like there's no streamlined path. You say, hey, our goal is to be a top 4 team in the East in 3 years, and then here's how we get there. Or our goal is to be a competitive playoff team by the end of this season or the end of next season. Here's how we get there. You have to have an understanding of where you're going as an organization, and everybody has to be on the same page. And right now, especially given how the last handful of games have gone for Brooklyn, it feels like a team that doesn't have a direction. And as a result, a lot of teams are going to be calling about these guys on this team, and it could very easily become a situation where they just start trading guys away. Now, obviously, I can be unbiased about my team, but at times, I worry a little bit about maybe having too strong of an opinion one way or the other about the Nets. So I'm curious about what you guys have to say in the comment section. What would you do if you were in charge of the team? Would you try and keep it going? Would you play Cam Thomas more? Would you trade Cam Thomas? Would you trade for a star? Would you trade all of these role player guys away? What would you do if you were in charge of the Nets? Because if I'm honest, it's one of the more difficult situations to figure out right now in the league.